The camera is grainy, the lighting is dim, but the image is unmistakable. An 11-year-old girl, blonde hair tucked behind her shoulders, walks alone across the lot of a Sarasota car wash. She doesn't know it, but someone is already watching her. From the edge of the frame, a man appears. At first he looks casual, like he's just passing by, but then, in a single calculated step, he moves directly into her path. He leans in, blocking her way. She freezes. His hand clamps around her arm. For a split second, she looks like she might pull back. She doesn't. He whispers something we can't hear, and in seconds he's steering her out of sight. She's gone. That was 6:30 p.m. on January 31st, 2004. The last known moments of Carlie Brucia. Hours later, detectives would replay that tape over and over. The image of a child being led away by a stranger would burn itself into the memory of an entire community. And for Carlie's family, the nightmare had only just begun. At 6 o'clock, Carlie had promised she'd be home. By 7, she was nowhere to be found. Her stepfather, Steve Kanzler, drove the same mile stretch again and again, headlights sweeping over empty sidewalks. He rolled down the window, calling her name into the night. Nothing. By the time he pulled back into the driveway, dread had already set in. Susan, Carlie's mother, didn't need to hear an explanation. She felt it. Something terrible had happened. Together they went back out, retracing her route, checking side streets and wooded patches. At one point, a red tow truck crept past them. Odd. They noticed it again minutes later, parked in front of the friend's house Carlie had just left. But Carlie wasn't there. At 7:30 p.m, Susan's panic spilled into the phone lines. Her voice cracked as she told the 911 operator, "My daughter is missing. She's only 11. We've searched everywhere."
911, what's the location of the emergency?
My daughter is missing.
What's your address, ma'am? And your phone number? Okay. Has she been missing before?
No, she had a fight with her girlfriend. She decided to walk home, and we've been driving around for about an hour and a half. And it's not an hour and a half walk.
Within minutes, a bolo was issued. Be on the lookout for Carlie Brucia. Officers combed the area. Nothing. Neighbours joined in. Flyers were printed. The search was officially on. But while the family clung to hope, investigators were already preparing Susan for the unthinkable. Before leaving her house, they told her to call Carlie's dentist. They might need dental records for identification. It was a warning no parent should ever hear. The search had barely begun when suspicion turned inward. Steve Kanzler, Carlie's stepfather, was restless. He handed out flyers, desperate for leads. But one comment he made struck a nerve. At an equipment rental store, he allegedly asked if someone could get him drugs. After this whole thing blew over, the employee was stunned. A missing stepdaughter, and that's what was on his mind. He called police. Detectives brought Steve in. His answers were calm, maybe too calm. He insisted he'd been at home with Susan the entire evening. Susan backed him up. The alibi checked out. Eventually, investigators cleared him. But the doubt had already taken root. Then came another lead. The red tow truck. Steve swore he'd seen it circling near the search route. The truck belonged to Ron Choquette, a man casually dating the mother of Carlie's friend. Ron admitted he was home the night Carlie slept over. At one point, he was the only adult in the house. It was enough to raise eyebrows. But when detectives pressed him, Ron said he'd already left for work before Carlie walked home. His co-workers confirmed it. The red truck was scratched off the list. Still, officers couldn't shake the sense that something darker was at play. Carlie's friend hinted she'd been upset, maybe even reluctant to go home. Could this be a runaway case, or was it something far worse? The uncertainty weighed heavy. But the very next morning, police dogs traced Carlie's scent. It ended not on her route home, but at Evie's car wash. And there, hidden on a security tape, was the proof. Carlie hadn't run away. She'd been taken. The dogs had led police straight to Evie's car wash. The grainy surveillance tape did the rest. At 6:30 p.m, Carlie appears on screen. Seconds later, a man steps into her path. Tattoos coil down his forearms. He's dressed in what looks like a mechanic's jumpsuit. A name tag glints on his chest, but the camera can't make it out. With one quick motion, he seizes her arm and pulls her from the frame. When Susan and Steve saw the footage, their hearts collapsed. The girl on that tape was undeniably Carlie. The stranger beside her, they had never seen him before. The video hit local news stations within hours. Over and over, the public watched Carlie's final moments of freedom, and then the calls came in. Hundreds of tips, hundreds of names. Most were dead ends, but a handful of callers said the same thing. That looks like Joseph Smith. Smith, 37, an auto mechanic, already had a history that read like a warning label. Drug arrests, violence against women, kidnapping, false imprisonment. He was out on parole, and one of his co-workers swore the man's mannerisms on the tape matched him exactly. Detectives now had a name, and they knew time was running out. Detectives drove to a small house in Sarasota, where Joseph Smith was renting a room from friends. As they pulled up, they spotted him outside, cigarette in hand. But when they knocked, the door stayed shut. Minutes later, his sister slipped inside, and eventually Joseph appeared, claiming he'd been asleep the whole time. The questions started fast. Where were you Sunday evening? Smith said he'd been at home, watching the Super Bowl. He insisted his friends could vouch for him. When detectives showed him the still frame from the car wash video, he didn't deny the resemblance. Looks like me, he admitted, but swore he wasn't there. Then came the request. Roll up your sleeves. The tattoos on his forearms matched perfectly. Investigators also noticed cuts and scrapes on his hands. Smith brushed them off as nothing, but his story began to fray further. He admitted he had borrowed his friend's car the night Carlie vanished, a pale yellow station wagon. Surveillance showed a yellow vehicle circling the car wash minutes before the abduction. Smith said he only drove it to the marina to look at the water. His friends, however, weren't so sure. One of them later revealed the odometer had racked up more than 300 miles during that trip. And then there was his outfit. On the night Carlie disappeared, Smith had left the house in a mechanic's uniform, the same kind of jumpsuit caught on the tape. Piece by piece, the walls were closing in. But Smith wasn't talking. Joseph Smith's silence didn't last. From jail, he called his brother John and confessed. He admitted taking Carlie, assaulting her and choking her too hard. John led police to a wooded patch behind a church where Carlie's body lay hidden, bruised and bound. Forensics confirmed the worst. Ligature strangulation, Joseph's DNA, and fibers from her clothes inside his borrowed yellow station wagon. Outrage swept the community. How had a man with 13 prior convictions, including violent offences, still been free? In 2005, Smith was convicted of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and sexual battery of a child. The judge overturned his death penalty, but he died in prison.
It was one of the most precious things to me in my life because of an animal, a disgusting, perverted animal.